not because of our weapons, but because of how we think. When 17 alien species prepare for the worst, Earth sends just one quiet soldier. No lasers, no threats, just instinct, strategy, and empathy. In a universe built on caution and protocol, can a single human rewrite what it means to be powerful? Stay with us, because this isn't just about survival. It's about proving that sometimes the sharpest weapon is restraint. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move toward this wonderful story. The hall was quieter than usual, though not because of a lack of voices. In fact, the grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly was filled with murmuring, a mix of languages and sounds from dozens of different species. But something about today's meeting had settled a strange unease over the delegates. It was the kind of quiet that came before a storm, or perhaps before a surprise. Word had spread quickly. Humans were arriving. 17 species sat around the glowing oval table, each delegate with their own concerns. Some spoke through translators, others directly. Most carried with them a blend of suspicion and curiosity. At the center of the tension sat Ambassador Tevquol, a tall crystalline being with fractal limbs that shimmered like glass. He leaned forward, voice as cold and sharp as the edges of his form. You cannot give humans access to anything critical, not without control measures in place, he warned, clicking softly. Their history speaks for itself. A few nodded in agreement. Others, like Zentha Kor, a gelatinous diplomat from the peaceful Solari Union, chuckled, her translucent form quivering with amusement. Perhaps we should wait before casting judgment, she said, her tone as light as vapor. Earth is sending scientists and diplomats, only one military officer. That hardly suggests aggression. Sometimes one is all it takes, muttered another delegate, his tendrils curling with unease. The meeting room buzzed as more voices joined in. Some quoted Earth's achievements, faster than light travel, rapid medical advancement, peaceful treaties with neighboring worlds. Others pointed out darker events, resource wars, ecological collapse, and repeated brushes with global self-destruction. In the corner, Council Leader Urox, a heavy-shelled being from the planet Gravalis, remained silent. He rarely spoke unless he had made a decision, and he had not yet done so. A chime sounded. Everyone turned. The chamber doors hissed open as 4 humans entered. They were led by a middle-aged man with streaks of gray at his temples and a calm, focused expression. This was Professor Ennis Halden, Earth's lead envoy and chief science advisor. Behind him walked 2 others, Dr. Lisa Noor, a cultural researcher, and Nolan Kai, a linguist known for his work with nonverbal species. But it was the 4th figure who drew the most attention. Captain Mirel Darrow stood just a step behind the team, his military uniform neat, his stance formal. His expression was unreadable, calm, but alert. While the others nodded and smiled, Darrow merely scanned the room. His gaze flicked from exit to exit, noting security placements, body language, potential risks. The assembly noticed. It was hard not to. Welcome, Zentha said first, sliding forward with an eager ripple. On behalf of the assembly, we greet you and your kind. This is a hopeful day. Professor Halden stepped forward, speaking clearly. Thank you for receiving us. We are honored to stand before the assembly and hope this is the beginning of a shared future. Tevquol didn't rise. Before we continue with the pleasantries, he said, addressing the assembly rather than the humans, we must address the matter of security. Captain Darrow must surrender all tools or items that could be used for harm. Halden gave a quick glance at Darrow, who nodded once and began emptying the contents of his uniform pockets onto a small inspection table. Out came a utility pen, a length of paracord, a foldable survival knife, and a compact metal cylinder. Tevquol's limbs stiffened. And that? Tactical flashlight, Darrow said simply. A weapon, Tevquol hissed. Darrow tilted, his head. A light source, but in the wrong hands, I suppose anything can be one. A flicker of amusement crossed Zentha's face, if her shifting color meant anything. Well said. Urox finally moved, his voice gravelly and deep. Let the record show the human officer complied, But we will test more than obedience today. We will test intent. Professor Halden frowned slightly. May I ask how? Jurox's eyes narrowed. 3 simulations. Your officer will face them alone. No weapons, no backup. We will observe. Dr. Noor stepped forward. Captain Darrow is a soldier, not a performer. He is your representative, Tevquol replied coolly. If humans are to be part of this council, we must see how they act without guidance or force. The room tensed. It was a challenge, not just of skill, but of nature. Would the human solve problems with aggression? Would he seek power or peace? Darrow looked to Halden, who offered a small nod. Darrow stepped forward, straightened his shoulders and said, I'll participate. Jurox tapped a control on the table. So it begins. As the humans were escorted from the main chamber to the observation deck above the simulation arena, quiet descended again. Only this time, it wasn't nervous. It was curious. The kind of quiet that comes before something worth remembering. The training deck shimmered to life with a quiet hum, and Captain Mirel Darrow stood alone in the center. Around him, curved observation windows reflected the watching eyes of 17 species. Somewhere behind the glass, Professor Halden and the rest of the human team observed in silence, unsure what to expect, but trusting Mirel to represent more than just Earth's strength, its adaptability. Without warning, the room transformed. One moment it was polished metal and smooth lighting. The next it was an alien jungle, dense, humid, and alive with strange sounds. The air was thick, buzzing, with insects that sparkled like glass, and unfamiliar plants rustled as if they were aware of being watched. A soft chime echoed through the canopy, followed by a voice overhead. Objective: reach the extraction point 5 kilometers northeast. Time limit: 1 hour. No external tools allowed. Survival conditions activated. Mirel didn't move immediately. Instead, he crouched, letting his hand brush against the soil. It was damp and loose. The scent of the ground reminded him faintly of rich earth back home. He looked around, not just with his eyes, but with his full attention. He found the direction of the artificial sun, using it to determine east. The readout had said northeast, so he began walking, but not toward the goal. He turned and moved west, toward the sound of rushing water. In the observation room, several delegates murmured in confusion. He's going the wrong way, one noted. But Professor Halden shook his head slightly. He's gathering what he needs first. Down in the jungle, Mirel moved swiftly. His steps were deliberate, careful. When he reached a shallow stream, he examined it for a moment, then found 2 large leaves and folded them into a crude cup. He filled it with water and waited. When the leaves held firm and the liquid remained clear, he drank. Then he built a second container using flexible vines to hold more water for the journey. Instead of rushing forward, he took the time to study the area. He examined the trees for signs of wildlife. He collected long vines, sturdy sticks, and anything that might help him later. With these materials, he built a few simple traps, not elaborate, but effective. Loops tied between trees, pressure, points buried under leaves. He placed them not at random, but along paths he expected to take. 15 minutes passed before he began his true journey toward the extraction point. As he moved, he stayed alert. It didn't take long for the simulation to increase the challenge. The jungle grew louder, more aggressive. Something rustled to his left. Then the foliage split open as a predator launched itself at him. 6 legs, a mouthful of sharp teeth, and glowing red eyes. Mirel didn't hesitate. He stepped back, leading the creature forward, straight into one of his traps. The vine snapped, shut around its legs, lifting it off the ground as it thrashed and vanished in a burst of simulated static. Mirel was already moving again. In the observation deck, Zentha core rippled with excitement. He planned for it. He knew something would come. He assumed a threat would appear and prepared in advance, Professor Halden added. That's survival training and instinct. 2 more predators followed not long after. This time Mirel acted even faster. The first he led into a thick tree trunk, using its speed against it. The second he took down with a spear, fashioned from one of the sticks he had earlier sharpened with a stone. He struck with precision, not anger, and stood silently as the simulation faded around him once more. He reached the extraction point with 12 minutes still on the clock. His uniform was dirty, soaked with artificial sweat, and his hands bore minor scratches, but his breathing was steady. He didn't collapse, he didn't celebrate, he simply waited. In the control room, the silence was different now. It wasn't the tense silence from earlier, it was something else. Respect. Even Ambassador Tevqual, who had doubted humans most, tapped his crystalline fingers together slowly. That was efficient, calculated, Zentha agreed. He didn't fight unless he had to. He made the environment work for him. Council Leader Urok spoke finally. Trial 1 complete. Subject shows sufficient survival instinct and strategic preparation. Ready the next simulation. Mirel stood alone in the center of the jungle as it faded, the vines and trees melting away into light. He rolled his shoulders, exhaled slowly, and waited for what would come next. He wasn't here to prove he was the strongest. He was here to show something far more powerful, that humans were capable of learning, adapting, and surviving without violence as their first answer. Above, unseen by him, Professor Halden leaned forward. He's not just passing tests, he said quietly. He's rewriting the expectations. And in that moment, as the jungle vanished and the room shifted to a new form, Mirel Darrow stood calm and ready, not just as a soldier, but as a symbol. The jungle had vanished, replaced by something entirely different. Now, Captain Mirel Darrow stood in the middle of a bustling alien marketplace, surrounded by noise, color, and chaos. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved between stalls built from strange materials. Bright fabrics waved in the air, unfamiliar spices filled the air with sharp and sweet scents, and the clatter of trade echoed from every direction. It was a beautiful mess, organized only by invisible rules that made sense to the locals and no one else. This was the second trial. A message appeared in the air above him, written in both Galactic Common and English. Objective: obtain the Star Core Converter Module. Restrictions: no violence, limited resources, time limit 1 hour. The challenge was clear. He needed to secure a valuable item with almost nothing to offer in return. It wasn't a test of strength. This time it was a test of his brain and his ability to earn trust. Mirel checked the satchel they'd given him. Inside were a few basic medical supplies, a compact power cell, and 3 packs of Earth Standard rations. That was all. No credits, no weapons. Just a handful of items, none of which were worth the price of a Star Core converter. He didn't frown or sigh. Instead, he zipped the bag closed and began to walk slowly, observing everything. In the observation chamber above, the alien delegates leaned forward. Zentha core shifted into a brighter hue, her version of curiosity. Now we'll see how humans handle being powerless, she said softly. Mirel walked the market for several minutes without trying to trade. He watched how others interacted. Some vendors shouted to attract buyers. Others kept quiet and let their products speak for themselves. He noted which stalls had long lines and which stood nearly empty. He observed body language, who respected, who avoided eye contact, who looked desperate. When he finally stopped, it was at a small stall with broken medical scanners piled to one side. The vendor, a creature with 4 narrow arms and skin like stone, barely looked up. Mirel reached into his bag and gently set the compact power cell on the counter. "I'll trade this for a working scanner," he said calmly. The vendor frowned. "None of these work." Mirel nodded. "I can fix one. If I do, we trade." The vendor grunted, waved him behind the stall. 10 minutes later, Mirel had one scanner blinking with power again. The vendor kept his word and handed over an old scanner, barely holding together but still functional. With that, the trade chain began. Mirel didn't aim directly for the converter. He knew it was too valuable to grab without leverage. Instead, He made small trades. The scanner went to a mechanic for 2 repair tools. The tools helped him fix a cooling unit at another stall, which earned him a small amount of local currency and a favor. That favor earned him access to a vendor who normally only dealt with known traders. Piece by piece, he built a network. Each exchange created a ripple, one vendor vouching for another. A nod of respect passed silently across the marketplace. He helped one elderly trader realign their hover stall using only vines. Weights and patience. Another vendor with a sick child was given 2 of Morel's rations in return for a rare part that no one else had. He never begged. He never lied. And he never tried to cheat the system. Everything he did was built on fairness and clarity. Slowly, his name began to spread among the traders. "The human," they whispered, "the one who helps." Up in the chamber, the observers were no longer whispering. Tevqual tilted his crystalline head slightly. "He isn't bartering. He's building. He's increasing value by improving his environment," Zentha noted. "Not just trading things, trading effort." The star core converter still remained, protected in a reinforced case at a high-end stall. The vendor there, a tall, sharp-featured being with rows of eyes, watched Morel approach with mild amusement. "You can't afford it," the vendor said, voice flat. Morel nodded once. "I can offer you 2 things," he replied. "First, a working neural stabilizer I rebuilt. And second, access to 5 traders who now owe me favors. They trust me. That kind of connection has its own value here." The vendor paused. Slowly, his expression shifted. "Favors," he repeated. "You used nothing and created something." Morel didn't reply. He simply placed the stabilizer on the counter and waited. After a moment of silence, the vendor pushed the converter forward. "Deal." With the converter in hand, Morel returned to the center of the market. The moment he stepped into the marked circle, the simulation faded. The stalls vanished, the noise disappeared, and he was back in the training deck surrounded by silence. The observation room was quiet too, but only for a moment. Then murmurs broke out. Confused, impressed, thoughtful. Council leader Durox cleared his throat. Objective achieved, without violence, without currency, and with minimal time remaining. Zentha was glowing brightly now. He created community in an hour. That's not survival. That's influence. Tevqual said nothing, but he watched Morel with narrowed eyes. Captain Morel Darrow stood quietly, not seeking praise or celebration. He had passed the test, not by forcing the market to bend, but by working with it, learning its rhythm and finding a way forward. He didn't take anything by strength. He earned it. The chamber changed one final time. Gone were the jungles and the market stalls. Now Captain Morel Darrow stood in what looked like a high-level diplomatic hall. Wide circular space, soft lights, and a grand table surrounded by life-sized holograms of alien delegates. The air was calm, almost peaceful, yet beneath it was a tension that felt ready to snap at any moment. A voice echoed overhead, smooth and cold. Final scenario, protection. Objective, ensure the safety of all attending delegates, threat unknown. Begin. Morel didn't move right away. He let the silence settle, then took a slow breath and scanned the room. He walked the perimeter once, noting exits, vents, and corners where someone could hide. He chose a position near the largest entrance where he could keep an eye on most of the room while blending in. His posture shifted subtly, relaxed but ready, a soldier's kind of stillness. The holographic meeting began, the delegates discussing trade and security topics in carefully measured tones. At first everything seemed normal, but Morel never stopped observing. He watched more than just the conversation. He watched how each diplomat moved, spoke, and responded. It took only a few minutes for him to notice something strange. One of the delegates, a tall, insect-like figure with 4 arms and a flowing robe, was acting off. The others didn't notice it, but Morel saw the hesitation in the creature's speech, the slight twitch in its smallest limbs, the unfocused eyes. He moved slightly closer, still keeping his posture neutral. The diplomat was hiding something, Without warning, the insectoid delegate lunged forward, pulling a ceremonial blade from its robe and aiming it at the nearest holographic diplomat. The action was sudden, but Morell was faster. He intercepted the attack with one hand, twisting the blade away with practiced precision, while his other arm shielded the intended target and guided them to safety. It all happened in seconds. The attacker struggled, but Morell didn't strike. He used his body to block further attacks, not hurt the attacker. In the observation deck, the real delegates leaned forward, frozen in silence. Morell's voice came through the simulation's audio system clearly. "Threat detected. Please evacuate the room in an orderly manner. Remain calm." He didn't lash out. He didn't shout. Instead, he kept the attacker in view, stepped between it and the others, and waited. The other holographic delegates followed his instructions and began to leave. Only then, with the room cleared, did Morell speak again, directly, to the attacker. "You're not thinking clearly," he said, voice steady but kind. "You're showing signs of neurological instability. You need help, not punishment." The attacker shook, breathing erratically, its limbs jerking in ways that didn't match normal movement. Morell slowly stepped forward, his hands open and empty. He didn't demand the weapon, he asked. "Give me the blade, I'm not here to hurt you, I want to help." For a moment it seemed like the simulation might force a fight, but then slowly the blade was dropped. Morell caught it carefully, then helped the delegate sit down, checking its pulse and other signs. He used one of the simple tools from earlier, his emergency penlight, to check the creature's eye responses. Then he called for simulated medical backup. The trial ended. The scene faded into light, and the room returned to the empty training deck. Morell stood again in silence, alone in the center, waiting for judgment. In the observation chamber, it was quiet again. Not with doubt this time, but with awe. Professor Halden didn't speak. He didn't need to. Zentha Core's surface rippled with emotion. "He avoided escalation when he had every right to use force," she said softly. "Why?" Council leader Urox turned to face the human team. "We must ask him." The audio was enabled again. Morell heard the question clearly. "Why didn't you neutralize the threat immediately?" Urox asked. "That was the quickest solution." Morell looked up. "In some situations, yes, but not this one." The attacker wasn't driven by aggression. It was something else, something uncontrolled. Maybe medical, maybe psychological. But if I'd reacted with violence, others might have followed. Panic spreads. One bad reaction can undo peace efforts that take years to build. Tevquil narrowed his crystalline eyes. "But how did you know in that moment, with no time?" "It's my job to notice the smallest details," Morell said simply. "And I've trained to act without emotion clouding my judgment." Urox leaned back, his heavy shell creaking. "You protected everyone, including the attacker. You followed the rules, but more importantly, you understood why they exist." There was a pause. Then slowly, Council leader Urox stood. "Humanity has passed the final assessment." The words hung in the air like music. The observers began to speak again, this time not with concern, but curiosity and even admiration. In the final meeting that followed, seated now in the real council hall, the humans were invited to speak not as guests, but as equals. Morell didn't say much. He stood near the edge of the room, his eyes still watchful. But when one of the newer delegates asked why he'd joined the mission, Morell offered a quiet answer. Because peace needs protection, and someone has to be ready to protect it without starting a war. As the session closed and the stars outside shimmered like diamonds, it was clear something had changed. Humanity wasn't just another species anymore. They were now a part of something bigger, not because they fought well, but because they chose when not to fight. And sometimes, that's the rarest skill of all.